I'm in the present, no judgment, I'm here now. I'm in the present, no judgment.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Here in the Now podcast with your host, JG Larochette, over here at Mindful Life Project. Welcome to episode 12 of Here in the Now, the Educator Wellness Podcast. Hope you've been doing well in mind, body, and heart. It is a time where we can all dig in together here on this episode. Today, we'll be talking about cultivating and letting it grow. Right? So here we are as human beings in this experience that can oftentimes feel like a roller coaster. And if we don't hold sight that growth, well-being, mental and emotional health takes time and persistence cultivation, we're forgetting that this life is a journey. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, maybe 10 marathons. Those of you who've lived some decades like I have, yeah, it's just not one. There's different chapters in life, right? And so as we kind of dig in today, we're going to talk about how to be consistent in improving our mental, emotional, physical well-being, how to really let it grow and not expect too much, right? I think that sometimes as humans, we expect that quick result, that quick fix, that thing that, okay, I'm done, I've made it, right? And instead, this practice, right, this practice of mindfulness and this practice of compassion and all the practices that go with it are about nurturing and cultivating in the here, knowing that we'll be more and more present now, but also that's going to help us in the future. But if we don't keep moving forward on a daily experience with it, we're starting to lose it, right? So the atrophying that happens with a muscle, if it isn't being used, is the same thing that's going to happen with our mental and emotional muscle. So today, let's drop in a little bit. Let's just start with a little curiosity. Check in with yourself for a second. How is the emotional landscape in this moment? Is it easeful? Is it hard to check in? Is some peace? Is there joy? Is there some frustration, rage, maybe some lack of patience? Just check in. No judgment, just notice. And just know by noticing, you're already cultivating something, you're letting something grow. Then let's move ahead and check that mental landscape, right? So go in there for a second. And are there lots and lots of thoughts? Is the to-do list forever? Or is the brain going kind of into that negative bias and criticizing yourself and wishing things were different and kind of holding this expectation of life that might not be true with the thoughts that are floating through? So when we talk about cultivating and letting it grow, we're talking about really allowing ourselves to be in this nurturing, skillful, and strategic on-purpose practices and letting the time and experiences to be as they are without wanting or needing to do something different with them or not have them be. So in that way, a lot of times as we kind of go into these more deeply grounding and complex layers of our human experience, we might come across this idea that like, once I get there or once I accomplish this, I will be healed or I'll be where I need to be, okay? And instead, what we know, just like if you're gonna get the soil ready to plant some seeds and you're gonna plant those seeds and nourish them with water and the sun and letting them grow and fertilizing them and whatever it might be that we're doing to help those plants grow, it's going to take a lot, right? And that's kind of what these practices are. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen that you're going to plant a seed and the next day you're going to have this huge plant. But often that's kind of the way that the brain is orienting. It's wanting this quick result, this quick thing to happen, or it's not worth it, or it's too hard. So today, let's dig into some ways, let's practice some ways that we can cultivate and orient to this long growth pattern versus the short wishing that we're different right now. So let's start with mindset, okay? When we are suffering, mentally, emotionally, or physically, we usually want to escape that suffering. So then we're going to look for the external factors to either get us fully away from it, right? Cope with it if it's coping with it in whatever form that looks like, healthy or unhealthy. And then as we kind of start coping and working with these things, we're then looking for it to be, in the next week, I want to be better, or the next 2 weeks. And while we do want to orient to the mindset of improving on a daily basis, we also have to understand that this is going to be a long process. And really, at the end of the day, just like with plants, it's going to be forever, right? And that by cultivating and letting things grow in its own pace and allowing this moment to be as it is and using these moments that we nurture and cultivate, but also knowing that we need to remove this expectation that we're going to get to a quick destiny, or even that there is a destiny to be completed, so that we're in a different space in our lives. So really what we're talking about is this full immersion that healing empowerment is a lifelong journey. It's not I got there, I did it, now I'm done. It's what am I doing on a very consistent experience that's going to grow slowly oftentimes, right? I've been doing practices both in my own practice and with guided practice and retreats and courses for the last 10 and a half years. And there's so many points of learning and growth, but they were little ones along a long spectrum, little seeds that then have grown. And that, if you want to use the analogy of a lush, beautiful farm or a forest, that now it's becoming more green and more lush. There's some gaps still in there, but there's growth. And that's what we're doing. We're really using the present moment and our mindfulness practices and our compassion practices to continue to nurture and grow, and know that sometimes we're going to fall and we're going to, like, the plant might die, and then we'll have to recreate it again. And when that plant dies and it doesn't make it, we don't just judge and like, all right, we're done growing more plants. We're going to go back and we're going to cultivate a new season of growing. And that's what we're really focusing on here, right? And especially in education, especially as educators out there, not only are you cultivating your own personal wellness, it's so deeply important, that mindful educator versus the mindfulness educator, right? The embodied, I am present, I'm non-reactive, I'm able to connect and attune to what's happening in me and around me with my youth. But then also, how do we start to then cultivate this lens of like, once I'm there, now I can share, now I can grow this with others. But often we're trying to push through curriculums and things that are being pushed down on us and get those done, and we're not allowing the growth to happen. And I say this especially around a lot of what we see in education systems, right? We expect things to change within a year or two. The science is pretty clear that if we're going to work on mental and emotional health and really regrounding the way people are living in their human experience, especially enduring lots of trauma and stress, you can't expect it to be done and healed in a year or two. So why are we using curriculums and things for 2 years, and then what's the next one? And that's what we're talking about. You see the micro, this individual, and then the macro, the systems and the way we push, that we don't let things actually fully develop and fully be seen and cultivated full to that extent. And then we rip it apart. So I'll pause for a second. What ways have you noticed in your own experience of investing in mental and emotional well-being? Have you planted those seeds, done the work, let that grow, and then it continues this kind of cycle of regrowth and some death, some regrowth, but at the end of it, there's more growth. There's more and more and more, and we start noticing that full embodied experience, some more peace, some more ease, some more acceptance, more radical non-judgment, some fully connected to this human experience. And then think of times where you're like, I got into suffering. I got into a place that didn't feel good. And I realized that I kind of abandoned all the things that had been working for me, or I didn't go all the way because, I just felt good enough. And then think about your young people, where you find yourself, right? So in that individual, but then also with those around you. Are we giving that disciplined, consistent dose of focused, intentional well-being practices? Are we actually using our five senses? Are we really living in the here and now or not? So cultivating and letting it grow. So both, right? Past, present, future has to happen at all angles. And so here today, let's dig into some practices. A few of the mindfulness practices have really helped me in that nourishing of being patient and allowing this human experience and the way that I navigate being this human in a skillful, non-reactive way, which is never perfect, by the way. Some keys for me have been around the lens by which I see my inner and outer experience. And key in that is the non-judgment. So one of the ways we can really improve our mental and emotional wellness is by changing and cultivating the lens of non-judgment. If I start noticing this inner experience and the suffering that might be arising, but I bring in non-judgment, guess what? It's not suffering anymore. It's just the way this experience is. I'm not resisting it. If I notice what's arising and I try to push it away and I start judging it, that creates the deep suffering. So that lens of non-judgment sounds so great, doesn't it? But we know the wiring of the brain is the opposite structure. It's going to look for the negative. It has a negativity bias. It's going to look at information as safe or unsafe. And a lot of times our own emotions and thoughts, even though the brain in the downstairs doesn't know the difference, they're not dangerous, but we're treating them like they shouldn't be there. So the more we tune in to there is something, discernment. I'm noticing in this experience, this is here. And instead of judging it, I'm with it. It's, I don't want to say welcoming because sometimes that's not the point. It's like, okay, that is here. I see it clearly versus it's wrong. It shouldn't be here. I want to change it. So non-judgment is so important. With non-judgment, I'm going to bring in this mental noting idea. So when we're practicing mindfulness in our stillness position in our practice, we're really trying to cultivate this focused awareness on one thing at a time. And when we get distracted, the gentle reminder without judgment to come back. One of the ways that we can do the extra work of dissolving the mental activity, the emotional reaction or whatever, is by mental noting. And what that means is both in my personal, seated practice or as I'm going through my day, that I note it as it is, right? So if it's an emotion, I just in my mind, emotion. It's not, oh, there's a good emotion, there's a bad emotion. I'm just mentally noting with that clear non-judgmental lens of what it is. That gets us up in the prefrontal cortex. So that allows our brain to register, right? This is what's here. Instead of going into the downstairs, the back of the brain, the reptile brain, and saying, oh, this is dangerous, try to resist, push it away, cortisol, adrenaline, do whatever, fight, flight, freeze, okay? So discernment, non-judgment, mental noting, and allowing what's arising to be there. And when we don't feel like it's allowed, then bring the non-judgment, oh, there's some judgment, let me bring the lens that I'm training, right? So what we can do is cultivate this experience of being human. And then throughout the day or in our practices, even when we're doing our mindfulness practice, we can then bring back, oh, I'm off. It's a forgetting and then remembering. But the clearness is like, I'm here now. And the mental noting is a huge way to help us do that. It's like you're putting a little sticky note, a little Post-it in your mind, right? Or you're sending yourself a little text. Here we are right now. This is what's happening. But again, it's going to help us cultivate throughout the days and throughout our experiences this here now without the judgment, and then start noticing and naming before it takes over. Thoughts, the emotions, the physical experiences, this human experience as it is, okay? So as always, at Here and the Now podcast, we want to do some practice that goes with what we're talking about. So we're going to really focus on non-judgment, of course, mental noting, and I'm going to allow some spaciousness. So we're going to allow, instead of focusing on breath or sound or body, I'm going to allow some spaciousness for you to just allow whatever's going to rise to arise. Maybe it's a sound, maybe it's an emotion, maybe it's a thought, maybe it's a felt sensation of the body, but we're going to let it be and then mental note it, right? See it coming, give it that little 1, 2, 3, name it, thought, 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 sensation, 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 emotion, emotion, whatever it is, we mental note it, and then allow the openness, the spaciousness to happen again. All right, so repeat after me if you'd like. The MLP way. I've got my feet on the floor. I've got my spine in a line. I've got my hands in my lap, my heart to the sky. And gently allowing the eyes to close if that feels comfortable. And remembering today's intention of practice is cultivating and letting grow. So every time that we're able to use the non-judgment, discernment, seeing clearly what's here without any need to judge it, that's cultivating one really, really important moment at a time, and it will grow. Right? Each time we're practicing in the seated position or we practice in the human experience on the daily activities, we're letting things grow. And it takes time, but I bet you, and just trust me, it's worth all the time in the world to invest in. Stay with the sound of the bell from beginning, middle, and end as long as you can. All right, so in this seated position, just first fully allow yourself to arrive. Let the body arrive. Notice any contact points, the weight, gravity. Allow your mind to arrive. So just maybe you want to focus on a couple inhales and exhales to become a little more present. Breathing in, know you're breathing in. Breathing out, know you're breathing out. So body, mind, and now let the heart just be here now. Just know that your heart deserves this time. That whatever, maybe it's open or hardened or you've been abandoning it because it's been a little hard, or you've been getting closer to wherever you're at, that right now you can touch back into that heart space. And now we're going to shift our awareness to the spaciousness, just allowing whatever is arising in this moment to do its own thing. And from that non-judgmental lens, we'll just notice it. We can give that little mental note a few times to it, and then sit in spacious and awareness again. So maybe you know some sounds that start having you thinking of some thoughts. And before too long, try to use that non-judgmental awareness, that discernment, that clear insight on what's happening right now, and just give it that mental note. And just come back and just let whatever else is going to grab our attention, grab our attention. Hearing that curiosity as we allow this spaciousness to be there, of what's filling the spaciousness. Is it mental activity? Is it emotional activity? Is it physical? The senses? Just notice one present moment at a time. As you start noticing any patterns or trends, See if that lens of non-judgment is still there. And if it's not, if the judging mind is deciding to kind of try to hijack this experience, you can always meet that with some heartfulness, some compassion, that this moment has some suffering, maybe. And that's okay. There's no need to judge the judge. So the judging mind comes, maybe that inner critic starts. We can meet that with kindness and care. So whatever you're noticing, see that this moment is brand new again. And that's the beauty of this practice, right? And even in the spacious awareness practice, we're letting emotions, thoughts, felt senses, allowing all of it to be as it is and let it arise. That whatever it is, that's already in the past. But the more we check in with that really clear lens of insight of what's right here, right now, as it is, the more present we become. So cultivating this kind awareness and letting it grow. So in the analogy of the plant, for example, we get that soil prepped, plant the seed, start giving it the water, letting the sun do its thing. And we might notice that, oh, we forgot to water for a few days. Maybe that's like this experience right now might be where we might have forgotten to use non-judgment. Yeah, the plant might, need some, it might be thirsty, that plant, but you can water it again and keep giving it as much attention and love as possible and just see what happens with it. And so the same thing here, we might forget to be in non-judgment, but the moment we notice we weren't, it's that time again to just cultivate it one moment at a time. And just coming back to mental noting, we'll just do another about a minute of practice. So just allowing that mental noting of what's right here for you right now. Again, there'll be tons of activity in our minds, our hearts, and our bodies, and the external world. We're not trying to remove those things or get away from them. We're just trying to engage with them in a more compassionate, present moment way. We'll close with about 30 seconds of breath or sound or body awareness practice. So you choose. As you're growing your mindful skills, you know which ones you need the most. Is it time to focus on the breath? Time to focus on sounds, the body? Time to bring some compassion in? Maybe bring in some mindful emotions, just naming what's arising and welcoming them. Maybe it's tracking thoughts without judgment. Maybe it's finishing with gratitude. Cultivating and letting them grow. And as we close practice, honor yourself, celebrate yourself, and know that what you've just done makes a huge difference. And whatever that experience has been for you, it's the planting, nourishing, letting it grow. And you're doing it. We'll stop with the sound of the bell in our practice today. And then open your eyes whenever ready. So again, Thank you for joining us in this podcast or community of practice, benefiting our individual selves, but also benefiting the thousands of youth that you all serve, right, all together. So again, spread the word here in the Now podcast with your host, JG Larochette at Mindful Life Project. Today, cultivating and letting grow. So find moments in your day, every day, if it's in seated practice, if it's in embodied practice, if it's going out for a walk and walking practice, if it's just cultivating compassion in the moment, cultivate as often as possible. Let the forest grow. Let those branches and trees and trunks and roots and bushes and all that good stuff grow, because you deserve it. May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you feel peace, may you feel love. I'll see you next time. Thanks again for joining us at Here and Now podcast, and we'll talk to you soon.
I'm in the present, no judgment, I'm here and now. I'm in the present, no judgment, I'm here and now. I'm in the